Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Happened to me a few weeks ago. Be me, deckhand on a Great Lakes cargo freighter. We're loading cargo in Canada, place on an island called Bruce Mines. Me and one of the engineers are off work. Engineer is planning on getting off the boat and walking to the bar in town. I went to ask the mate if I could go with. As a deckhand, I was always on call in case they needed me. Mate says I can go, but I need to be back by 2 a.m. since we'll be done loading an hour or two after that and leaving. Hell yeah, .png. Me and the engineer get on the dock and walk towards town. Dock security guy waves to us as we exit the gates. 20 or so minute walk to the bar. Once there, we have a few drinks. At midnight, we decided to head back. Once we're at the security gate, we see the guard arguing with someone. Our mate was there too. The guard is saying that he can't let the stranger on the dock without his credentials. As we get closer, I notice the stranger has the same hair as me. Engineer asks what the hell is going on. Mate and security guard look at us and their faces go pale. Strangers aren't paying us any mind. He keeps saying he needs to get in the dock, can't get a good look of his face. The security guard runs to his guard shack and pulls out a rifle. He points it at the stranger and fires at the ground around them. The stranger runs off into the woods. As he's running, I catch a glimpse of his face. It looks exactly like me, just slightly off, and I can't pin my finger on it. Guard and mate hurry us through the gate. We show them our credentials. Mate and us two go back to the boat, the guard to his shack. No one says anything. Not at the time or after. Mate doesn't say a thing at all. Engineer says it was a junkie and drops it at that. Company stops scheduling Bruce Mines loads. I don't know what the Doppelgänger was or why the area would have that. I'm not familiar with Canada.
So, a little bit of background. This happened about 8 years ago in Leafland, on Vancouver Island, where I moved with my mom for a short period of time when I was 12. Her side of the family lived on the island, while we lived on the mainland. Now, my grandfather was in the army when he was alive, and he left quite a few guns behind. Sadly, I wasn't old enough to go hunting with him while he was still alive. Okay, on to my story. It was summer break, and I had just graduated from elementary school. After the little ceremony, my mother told me that my Uncle John wanted to take me hunting. I had shot a rifle a few times before, but this would be my first time ever actually shooting at a living thing, so I was pretty nervous, but also a little excited. The day finally arrived and my uncle picked me up in his truck. We were going to a pretty big stretch of woods, and we would be camping there for 3 days. The only supplies we had with us were some basic rations, water, and 3 rifles. I'm not exactly a commando, so I can't really tell you the make and model of them, but I know we had 2.22 seconds and 1.308. From my experience with shooting the .308 and getting knocked on my ass, I asked my uncle what we needed such a powerful gun for. He said it was just in case we saw a bear, but something in his voice told me he wasn't telling me the whole truth. My grandfather was a very spiritual man, and I'm inclined to believe that he passed down some of his stories and beliefs to his children. My mother has had an out-of-body experience and seen a few ghosts, but those are different stories for another day. I'm half Cree Aboriginal on my father's side, so I had heard stories of the things that stalked the Canadian wilderness. We unpacked our stuff and started looking for a good spot to set up camp. After about a half hour of searching, we found the perfect spot of flat earth. We set up camp and loaded our rifles before heading out to try and bag a deer or something. The first day was completely uneventful, and we ended up just catching some fish with sharpened sticks and eating those. I had a feeling I would be sick of fish by the end of this. I'm a fairly light sleeper, so it's no surprise that I woke up in the middle of the night. I rubbed my eyes and sat up in my tent, realizing I had to piss. I moved to unzip my tent flap, but stopped as I heard something outside. I heard the sound of footfalls and quiet, ragged breathing. Like an idiot, I assumed it was my uncle and slowly zipped down the flap on my tent. I zipped it down just enough for me to peek outside to see if my uncle was still out there, as I needed privacy to pee. What I saw out there was not my uncle. It probably stood at about 7 feet, as it was taller than our tents and had oily black fur that glistened in the moonlight. I let out a low whimper and slowly zipped my tent back up. The breathing stopped for a second and then started to get closer. When it was mere inches away from my tent, the breathing stopped. For a few seconds, I thought the thing had left, and I just didn't hear it because I was so afraid. Then, it began to press its face against my tent. Judging from the outline, it had a muzzle that was slim like a fox, but it was much longer. It was at this point that I noticed how much this thing reeked. Being a sheltered city kid, I had never had to smell anything dead before, but as I've come to learn, that's what the thing smelled like. It smelled like the corpse of a skunk that was left to bake in the summer sun for a week. I curled up in my sleeping bag and covered my head, hoping it would leave. After what felt like an eternity, the thing skulked back into the woods. At this point, I no longer needed to pee. After changing my pants and getting a restful half-hour of sleep, my uncle came to wake me up. As we went to leave, he stopped and looked at the side of my tent.
"Oh, Danny, what the hell is that stain?"
I asked him what he was talking about, and he pointed to a slightly red stain on the side of my tent. It looked like saliva. My uncle went up to the stain and tried to get a whiff of it. He stood up and crinkled his nose before going and retrieving the .308. I didn't bother asking why. I wasn't having fun anymore. I just wanted this trip to be over and go home, but my uncle wanted to at least stay for one more day. That day, we actually ended up killing something. My uncle borrowed my .22 and shot a goose right out of the sky. I was pretty impressed, and excited that we would be eating something that wasn't fish. I was pretty disappointed when I learned that the goose had been mainly eating fish, and ended up tasting like them. My uncle had been pretty quiet the whole day, so I was surprised when he looked at me and asked,
"Danny, have you ever seen something that you just can't explain? Something that shouldn't exist in this world?"
I lied and said no, but I'm sure he didn't believe me.
"I'm going to try and get us something for dinner, but I'm going alone. Don't follow me. If I'm not back within an hour, call the police on my phone."
After that, he set up a fire and left. I began to get impatient, so I started looking for games to play on his phone. It was a little BlackBerry, so the best I could get was solitaire. However, I didn't get to play long before I heard rustling in the brush near the fire. I grabbed my .22 and aimed toward the noise and saw the creature from before. It made frantic gibbering noises, like it was trying to communicate, before running away from the camp, leaving a trail of black blood behind it. It turned out that my uncle had shot the thing, but it ended up running away. About a half hour later, my uncle came back to camp, covered in cuts and bruises.
"Come on, let's pack up our stuff, we're leaving."
I asked why, and he told me it wasn't safe there anymore. We drove back to my place in relative silence, until he dropped me off and drove back the way he came. My uncle never came out of those woods, and his body hasn't been found. I miss that old bastard.
Alberta is weird as hell when it comes to the supernatural. We're like the Maine of Canada, except also with even more baggage as a result of the massive amount of native deaths and freak accidents where entire towns got swallowed by rock slides. I lived in Calgary as a kid and massive amounts of weird things happened to me. One of the more notable incidents went as follows. Probably around 10-ish years old. Lying in bed, pretty comfy, although it's late. Parents are in bed, so I'm playing Pokémon Ruby under the covers. Suddenly I see a light from the door to my room and panic because I don't want to get caught and have my GBA taken away. Hide it under my pillow fast and lie back in bed, pretending to have my eyes closed but they're slightly open. Look at the doorway. Top corner of it is folded down like paper somehow. Pitch black human silhouette is staring at me through the corner, super bright light shining behind it. Door corner folds back up. The door opens. Human figure, still pitch black, enters my room. Light behind it is impossibly bright for the hallway. Eventually leaves, closes the door. Near instantly sit up in bed, but think I saw things wrong and it was actually my dad checking on me. Open bedroom door, hall is dark. Go to parents' bedroom, dad is snoring loudly as per the usual, despite him only checking on me like 10 seconds ago. Wordlessly head back to my own room, shaking. Don't sleep again the entire night. This incident specifically sticks out in my mind because I wasn't dreaming, as I was playing Pokémon and was awake when it started, and I wasn't having sleep paralysis because I could move.
You want a green text? I'll give you a green text. There's a huge thunderstorm going on right now, so it's perfect conditions for a scary story. Be 19 at the time. Broke college student in Leafland, so decided to get a job. End up working as a door knocker for a lawn care company. Basically, I was a door-to-door salesman that didn't even sell anything. Anyways, it was my Friday shift, so I was working pretty late. I was in the neighborhood on the opposite side of the dog park to mine. Now, this dog park is surrounded by a huge forest. The northern edge of the forest was across the highway from my property, but, since there wasn't a highway on this side of the park, the forest was right across the street, a good 4 or 5 yards away from me. Now, 4 or 5 yards might not sound like much, but when you're 4 or 5 yards away from a spooky forest at night, it doesn't feel like a long distance. Anyways, back to the green text. Night is actually going pretty good. Have 5 leads so far. Yes.png. Walking down a long driveway from a house I just got rejected at. Suddenly see a shape in the forest. Just assume it's a coyote, as those are pretty common in my area, and from what I saw it was just about the right size. Still decide to be cautious, because it's a wild animal. Decide to pick up the pace between houses. Do about 5 more houses. See that thing again. From this glimpse, the thing looks a bit too big to be a coyote. It was long, and had a bony spine poking out of its back. Alright, maybe it's just a long, starving coyote. Or maybe a stray dog, I don't know. Hear this odd gurgling coming from the woods. At this point I'm really freaking out here. Pretty much booking it between the houses. I had, like, 20 more houses to do on that street, and I knew my supervisor would tell me I was bullshitting her. On my last 5 houses, I haven't seen the thing in a while. Just assumed it left to eat something, whatever. Finally feeling safe again. I know, what a moron. Finish the houses, no new leads. Message my boss on the work tablet telling her I'm done. Look at the time, it's 10 o'clock at night. No wonder no one wanted to talk to me. Sit down on the cold, soggy sidewalk. Playing some emulator on my phone, probably playing Fire Emblem. Hear distant mumbling. Just assume it's one of my workmates, don't look up from my phone. Hey man, I've already finished this street. You know how far away Chelsea is? I know, that's really dumb, but hey, I was a stupid kid. I just thought, who else would be out here at the time? The mumbling stops and I start to hear rustling from the forest. My native blood finally kicks in and I realize, finally, that something's not right. Like a dumbass I yell, is anybody out there? No reply. Point my weak-ass phone flashlight into the woods. A pair of eyes are looking back at me. Just assume the dog's back, because there's no way that's the thing that could be muttering. Turn off my flashlight and go back to playing Fire Emblem. The mumbling starts again. It's definitely coming from the woods. Finally hear something audible. Hey man, I've already finished this street. You know how far away Chelsea is? Sounded almost exactly like me, but slightly off somehow. It was all garbled and screwed up sounding, like if you put a toad in a blender. At this point I want to nope out, but the woods go on for a couple more blocks and this is probably the most well-lit area. Frantically text Chelsea, my supervisor, and ask how far away she is. She's driving, so of course I don't get a reply back. Decide to stand up and move a little closer to the house. It's a pretty rural area, so the houses are pretty far apart. I usually would worry about the homeowner getting mad at me for standing on their property, but this was an exception. Is anybody there? Comes out of the woods, in the same messed up voice. Tactically shit myself and move a little closer to the house. Then I start hearing what sounds like a distorted version of a bird call. What even is this thing? No, at this point it's not someone messing with me. My ride finally shows up. Damn you Chelsea, why are you parked so close to the woods? Run to the van and jump into the back. Make the mistake of looking into the woods while doing so. Finally get a decent look at the thing that's been harassing me all night. Looks like a bipedal dog with matted, slimy black fur. I swear to God, this is the part that still gives me chills. The thing smiles and waves at me. Smiles and waves. Tell Chelsea to haul ass out of there. She gives me a weird look, but still says okay. Don't talk about what I saw. Tell my boss I'm quitting as soon as I get to work. Well, that's the end of the story about the only supernatural thing that's happened to me. I haven't seen anything since, and I'm more glad than ever that there's a huge-ass highway between me and that forest. Probably the only time I'm gonna tell this story.
This is one that happened to me. Be me, age 11 or so about 13 years ago, in rural Ontario, Canada. A buddy of mine's place has a forest that stretches way back behind his house. His dad had carved out trails leading all over the place back there. The two of us are out in the woods, off the trail, making our way through the brush. The brush, for reference, was probably about 6 or 7 feet high, and we were both around 5'6" or so. Walking, when out of the corner of my eye, I see it. The shadow of a man rises up over the brush, just the head and shoulders, and quickly darts back down. Assume I'm just seeing things, and forget about it. We leave the brush, emerging onto a trail, about 8 to 10 feet wide. Take a few steps down the trail when suddenly, what looks like a man, hunched over, darts from one side of the trail to the other, disappearing into the brush. The man was completely black, like a shadow, and made no noise. The brush on either side of the trail was undisturbed. Buddy and I look at each other. Did you see that? Yup. Turn and book it back out of the woods to his house. His mom tries to tell us it was probably just a coyote, yet it made no noise. Mention the head and shoulders I initially saw. Buddy says he saw it too, also thought nothing of it. To this day, I'm terrified to enter a forest alone, just in case I see something like that again. Second one that happened to me, a few years later. Be me, age about 13 or so. My family takes a trip to Ottawa, Leafland capital, for a week. Decide to go on one of those haunted ghost walks, where a tour guide leads you around the city, telling spooky stories about paranormal things that's happened. Have this little disposable camera my mom got me. All along the walk, I'm taking photos where the guy said ghosts have been spotted, pressing my camera right up to the windows of the buildings and taking pics of the insides. Ghost walked across the hall just through this window from this door to that door, take a pic of that exact hallway, stuff like that. Ghost walk finishes, the trip ends a few days later, head home. Get my photo roll developed. Huh? Weird. None of my ghost walk pics are here. With the batch of pictures, there's always one picture with thumbnails of all the others. Go over it. Picture 1 before the ghost walk batch is just a white blur. Pictures resume normally immediately after the ghost walk. Maybe there's a non-paranormal explanation for this. But where did my ghost walk pictures go? Did I see something I shouldn't have? Spookiest thing that ever happened to me. I just remembered one more. Be me, age maybe 10. This happened off-on for a couple years. The house I grew up in was in the middle of nowhere. Had a massive TV antenna on the side of it. 2 levels, television in the basement / lower level, kitchen and upper level. In the kitchen eating dinner with my family. Hear voices from the basement, like a conversation. Did somebody leave the TV on? I don't think so. Mom goes downstairs to check. TV was off. Voices stop. No idea who or what was speaking. Happens a handful of times over the years. Our best, non-paranormal guess is that the TV antenna was picking up signals that ended up coming through the TV, even when it was turned off, but we never really got an answer.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check out the Odyssey page in the description for a second archive of the channel's videos.
There's also a Rumble archive as a backup.